All right, so this is going to be a video on comparing resumes between Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder, and which I personally feel that there's no need to get into it, right? There's no need to really get into, at least in my opinion, not to get into their resume. But if you are gonna do resumes and I am asked my honest opinion, obviously that resume, the resume comparison and who has the better resume belongs to Anthony Joshua in 20 fights versus Deontay Wilder in 39. To me personally, even in their last fight, Carlos Takam, I felt that the fight was a bullshit stoppage, but he was winning the fight. It's not like Takam was winning and he stopped the fight. I thought that Anthony Joshua was winning the fight, right? You take Takam versus Bermane Stiverne, and I say Takam is the better fighter, the more active fighter, comes in better shape and always gives pretty good fights. Remember, Takam was in a fight I remember his fight with Alexander Povetkin, where the fight was close, right? In Russia, if you look at the scorecards up until the stoppage where Povetkin just timed him beautifully and knocked out Takam, the fight was competitive. It was a competitive fight. So even in their last fight, Joshua, Takam, and Deontay Wilder, Bermane Stiverne, you got to give the nod to, in my opinion, you got to give the nod to Anthony Joshua, right? But to me, I don't really go by the resumes, although the resumes could be a telling point if they ever fight, which I think they are. They're going to fight. I believe the fight's going to happen in the summer. There's a big build-up to make this fight happen for two different reasons. Personally, this is just my opinion. I think that it's to make Anthony Joshua, to continue to be this golden boy of heavyweight boxing, and in the UK, where he's going to be, he's just working on being a mega star in the future. For Deontay Wilder, I've always said this, I think that's a cash-out fight. Could it be a good fight, and it could end up being a rematch, depending on the outcome, even if Deontay Wilder was to lose the fight. I believe that's always possible. At the end of the day, this is all about maximizing the most money for these guys. Anybody who denies that would be foolish, but I think that just doing the eye test, this is not much of a matchup. I think that Joshua will destroy Deontay Wilder, and I think he'll do it pretty easily if the fight goes live. If the fight ever takes off, I say he stops him within 3 rounds. Wilder has terrible boxing fundamentals. I've said this plenty of times before. Terrible boxing fundamentals, and really, I just feel that once he gets in there with one of the top fighters, where there's no bullshit politics involved, or put it this way, where he doesn't have the upper hand when it comes to politics, in the case like with Anthony Joshua, and the fight goes live, I think that Wilder would be exposed pretty easily, right? That's just my opinion. I think the fight, until it happens, it's just an opinion. I think that fight would be where Wilder gets exposed pretty easily. And Wilder doesn't really, in 39 fights, it's really hard to make an assessment other than he's a terrible fighter when it comes to fundamentals. Does he have power? I think his power is even overrated. A lot of the stoppages that he has gotten, to me, were bullshit stoppages. Like, for example, the Gerald Washington fight, and his last fight with Bermane Stiverne, where Stiverne just looked like he was just there to take, to make Deontay Wilder look good. Whether that's true or not, if you just look at the fight, it just looked like Wilder had no fear. He just, kept his hands down, and Bermane Stiverne didn't really do anything, right? He didn't do anything. He didn't swing any punches with real intention, right? And pretty much, does he have power? I believe he does have power just from being a naturally big, athletic man. right? Where Anthony Joshua looks like he has more, to me, he looks like he has more power in terms of more legit power, just being a big man. I mean, if you fucking look at Anthony Joshua, you ever seen him in the interviews, you can tell this is a man who's fucking big, right? He's about 6'6". I think he's 6'6", about Deontay Wilder's height, and probably outweighs him by a good 20 to 30 pounds of muscle weight. And if you ever seen Anthony Joshua in interviews where he doesn't have his gloves on, you can see the big hands. You know, these are things I pay attention to as a boxing fan. Big hands are, I mean, it should be obvious when it comes to boxing. That's the sign of a man who has a lot of power or a lot of strength, right? And it goes with the build that he has. These are things that I take into consideration. When it comes to Anthony Joshua's resume, it's pretty good. It's not a bad resume for 20 fights, especially today. I think his win against Dominic Breazeale was a very good win, especially the way he destroyed him. You could think what you want about Dominic Breazeale now, but he was a guy that going into that fight was undefeated, and there was some hopes for him. And if you look at his fights after that, he's shown that he's a tough motherfucker, right? He had that fight with that African dude. His name slips me, but he was in a lot of trouble in that fight. Came back and stopped him. And his last fight with Eric Molina, which was an ugly fight, but he came out victorious. So Dominic Breazeale has shown that he's a tough dude, and AJ wiped him out, right? I'm not sure Wilder could even beat Dominic Breazeale, but even if he can, I don't think he'll beat him in the fashion that Anthony Joshua did, right? I don't know if he can beat him like that. But again, I don't play the triangle theory. I just go by what they do in the ring. And from what I see from Anthony Joshua, the way he's built, the way he boxes, I can't see where Deontay Wilder, with his shaky legs, his poor boxing technique, his poor defense, can actually win a fight against Anthony Joshua legitimately, right? Where there's no bullshit going around, legitimately win a fight against Anthony Joshua. Again, Joshua, to me, in my opinion, he's not a finished product in the ring as a fighter, but what he can do now is much better than what Wilder does. And really, the resume doesn't really tell me anything, although it could be a telling point once the fight happens, right? It could just be a telling point once the fight happens and the results are in. Another thing that I take into consideration, look at Anthony Joshua's fight against Vladimir Klitschko, and if you really look at that fight, there were certain things that Anthony Joshua did in order to come back and win that fight. Maybe I'll make a video talking about that. Somebody had made a video talking about it, and I'm not too sure Wilder can do those kind of things. So if Joshua's in trouble, he finds himself in any type of trouble with Deontay Wilder, which, listen, it's boxing, anything can happen. I don't think so, but let's say if it does, I don't think that Wilder will be able to avoid the certain things that I know that Anthony Joshua can do just from the Klitschko fight, the Vladimir Klitschko fight itself. Whether you think the fight doesn't have any true merit because Vladimir was 41 and was off a long layoff, and his last fight he lost. I think that Vladimir Klitschko wipes the floor with Deontay Wilder, or at the very least, he definitely beats anybody Wilder fought easily, right? So that Vladimir Klitschko alone that Joshua fought is much better than anybody Deontay Wilder has fought to this point. Anyway, that is my video on the resume comparison. I don't really get into it too much, although it could be a telling point once the fight happens. I do the eye test, what they could do in the ring, how they're physically built. I think all that stuff plays its part. Also personality. I think Deontay Wilder's loud, arrogant, depending if you're a fan of his or not, it could be annoying or it could be great. It's just false bravado, in my opinion, where Anthony Joshua, who's always smiling and seems very courteous, I don't really buy into that either. I think that there's definitely a mean streak in Anthony Joshua. He showed that in the Vladimir Klitschko fight. Anything he does outside the ring, where he's very courteous, smiling all the time, seems like a nice person, I think that's just for extra money. The extra money that he's gonna make outside the ring. Anyway, that is my video. Peace.